Hey everyone, hey all the ladies and gentlemen that listen to us. Today we are recording at DevOpsDays Ljubljana 2024. This conference is kindly hosted by Ivan and Marco from Povio Labs. Thanks for everyone organizing these conferences. I think that the guest and Otto, we know how hard it is. So yeah, we are amazed at the local community that we can have so many good conferences in such a small tech community. Well, we have a big heart, but the numbers are not that huge. I would also like to thank all our Patreons, all our supporters, 3FS, Human Frog, and Kaldi. That means a bunch to us. This is still kind of our hobby, and you know how it is with money and hobbies. It's not very profitable, or shouldn't be, right?
At least that I tell my wife.
Yeah, okay. No, we will get rich.
We'll get
Otto's
rich
5
very soon.
Just that you know. So today, me and Otto, we are welcoming Taylor Doal. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Amazing.
He's head of ecosystem at Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I will use Cloud Native Foundation. So yeah, welcome to Ugrodje, the Framework podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah. Welcome again. I mean, first time in Slovenia, probably jet lagged. You're pending to have a talk in a couple of hours, if I understand correctly. We have a lot of questions about this foundation that is essentially responsible, in quotes, for most of the infrastructure that we run in production around the world and in our offices and in our home labs as well. So yeah, let's get started. But like before we can actually tell to our audience what the foundation stands for, we need to establish your character. So I think Andras has like a very first question about like an icebreaker on how just to see who you are really.
It's a classical ops one. What's the most significant production F-up that you had in your past, in your career?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say some of my favorites have to deal with Kubernetes and working with that. Probably, I used to work at Walt Disney Studios. Okay. And so I was working with the groups in the theatrical distribution group. And we were one of the first to get Kubernetes spun up. We already had applications that were containerized and working with that. But I remember it was before we had these really awesome GitOps tools like Argo and Flux. And so you were just applying manifests directly. And so I remember naming, caching, right? Those are the hardest things for all of us. And that in DNS. But there was a time where I had I liked scoping everything with namespaces so that I can name everything the same. But when you don't check your context before you go and apply those things, then that can cause a kerfuffle. And so I remember I applied a whole bunch of things to what I thought was the staging namespace for all of these, like millions of orders were just about to come in for Disney. And yeah, that's some of the microservices there. I pushed them up. They weren't able to resolve because they're looking for the production FQDN and that URI. And so I had, thankfully I was sitting close enough to the development team that they came over and they said, "Hey, is prod down?" And I went, "No." "Oh, hold on." I went and changed it back. So only impacted about 3 minutes, but I think that was the biggest one. Some of the bigger ones at Disney, working like with wider teams, was some DNS issues because we linked everything off studio.disney.com. And so when anything further down the chain there were to break, we would have lots of F-ups, as you would say.
Yeah, DNS as usual, right?
Well, before you go more into like your role now, you came from DevOps, system ops background. Is that correct? Right? Like, how do you come from being more operations engineering kind of role into kind of like leading the vision of ecosystem and managing the stakeholders? Can you tell us a bit more in that regard?
Yeah. I'd say a whole bunch of good decisions and a whole bunch of mistakes is what led me here. I started off working with, I wanted to be a software engineer. And so I remember vividly back to one of my math classes, I had a TI-83 plus calculator. And someone was showing me, they were like ones you could borrow from the classroom at that time. And I remember somebody showed me the snake game, or nibbles as it was called. And so you'd see the snake go, try to eat the food and you grow, not try to like crash into yourself. They went, oh, hold on, check this out. And they changed a little asterisk to like a 0 or an O or an M. And I was like, what? That was it. I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And so started programming with that, working my way through there. Got started with like VB6 and .NET. And at about 16, I wanted to get into game design and stuff like that. So I learned very quickly that licenses cost a lot of money, and I didn't have that at 16. And so that's where I got into open source PHP and then Ruby, Go, and then kind of made my way closer and closer to infrastructure stuff when I started my own consultancy. And I had a client say, okay, Taylor, this code's great. How do we get it live? And I went, oh, I didn't think about that. And then that was my trek into systems design and distributed stuff and everything else. But yeah, really fun. It was kind of scary to learn that everything is basically a while true loop. But you know, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we go forward, like when we research our guest, right? Then you're ahead of ecosystem, and we are watching the Cloud Native Foundation landscape. I use it all the time. It's an awesome kind of JavaScript app, whatever, right? And yeah, I guess that what does head of ecosystem, what's your role? It's not a common corporate role.
No, it's something I try to figure out every day, honestly.
Okay. Like a startup.
Exactly. Yeah. We're just about 10 years old as a foundation, but there's just so much going on all the time. We went from one project, Kubernetes. We now have I think it's over 203 if I counted right last time.
Wow.
I didn't count it individually on the landscape, but we just rebooted that app too. One Easter egg for people, if you don't want to type in landscape.cncf.io, I can save you a little bit of time.
Okay.
Just type in l.cncf.io, then it'll load it up. But we added a stats page to that, rewrote it in Rust, and so that was kind of like a cool thing that got done recently. As head of ecosystem, it's my responsibility to work really closely with our end user community. And what's end user, that's also very generic. Those are people that are taking and really adopting these cloud native projects within their organizations. And that's more of an Apple, an Intuit, a Mercedes-Benz. It's groups that aren't selling cloud native services. They're not cloud service providers or consultancies. And they're building their entire business on these platforms. And their core competency might not be technology too, right? We want to save a lot of those organizations time and money with adapting and adopting a lot of these workflows with cloud native. Because again, they have other things to do, selling cars, B2C software, all of these other things. So I do a whole bunch of research. I work with people on programs like our Zero to Merge program, where we show people how to contribute to open source and be marketable. Do keynotes and get to talk to people. I get to travel like this and interact with the community. And then really just work. One other thing that we did was spin up an end user technical advisory board. And that's made up of about 13 individuals, some appointed, some voted in by the community. And that gives a much better anchoring point for our community to be able to talk with people. Because we used to say, hey, we care about vendors and end users, and it was just kind of hand wavy. We could connect you with end users, but there wasn't that interface, so to speak, for that. And so now we have that. And then a whole bunch of things lined up for KubeCon, which will be exciting.
Can you can you tell us a bit about this dashboard, just so for people who don't know? There is a chart. Just explain to us, please. Yeah, what is it?
So if you try to take it in all at once, you will get a headache. I can vouch for that. I've made jokes about that. There's lots of memes and stuff like that too. It's my recommendation is when you take a look at the landscape, you'll see a whole bunch of projects, and it's within differing categories. There's like app definition and delivery. There's observability. And then if you take a closer look, you can see subcategories in there too. So if you're looking specifically for like databases, you'll find that subcategory in there. And the goal, I recommend to no one that you go and adopt all of those projects and try to plug them in all over the place. That's absolutely where some confusion came in earlier on, because, you know, with like 10 projects, sure, there's enough of a problem space that it might make sense to adapt all those, but you
don't need everything in that big picture. Okay.
Exactly. It's for those that like to play with Legos, it's kind of like, okay, this one, here's the shape of the piece. And it just comes in a whole bunch of different colors or ways in which it actually fits into what you're trying to build, I think is a good way to think about it. Again, never, if someone wanted to adapt all those, that'd be a work of art rather than something usable, I would say.
But do you still collaborate? You told us that you collaborate with end users more or less, okay? But do you also collaborate with developers of these platforms, with engineers? Like, do you bring the knowledge that you obtain from the end users to them, or how does that work?
Definitely.
Do you help shape the roadmaps, or what's your role in that then?
With that, it's really about educating the end users on things like project health. It's end users that are taking these projects and adopting them. You want to know that they're going to be around tomorrow. And the fact that they're already in the foundation is a pretty good indicator. But even within our projects, we have sandbox, incubating, and then graduated projects. You can expect graduated to be very rock solid. It's proven itself. And our technical oversight committee, another governing body, has basically said, okay, it's gone from sandbox to incubating to graduated. All right, great. Sandbox is more the experimental and like exploratory projects that we have, and that we have the most of those. With any good software life cycle thing, you'll see a lot of those either get archived out or people stop working on them, etc. Incubating is going to be a little bit more solid, and then graduated is going to be most of all. With the tab structure that we've established too, we have some technical advisory board.
Okay.
And there's not spaces, tabs.
Okay.
But
okay.
They have a couple initiatives that they're working on right now. One of them is Project Health, and then another one of them is linking end users to projects, basically feedback and getting that in. So just like you said, I'll talk with a lot of folks, but it is introducing them to the projects, rather than me stepping in and saying like, hey, project, you got to do this. We're a vendor neutral foundation. And so we're not looking to pick the winner or be kingmakers. We're looking to just help out where we can. Security audits, patent litigation with open source. When you say
you want to help with these things, does that mean that you try to recruit open source contributors, or do you actually pay for engineers to work on these problems? Like, is all this stuff voluntarily, or like do the vendors have the ability to pay for these things? Like, there is probably some money involved. Tell us a bit more about the economic or business. I'm not sure the business model is the right question. Can you tell us? Yeah.
I think it's good to zoom out, because we'll get that a lot of the time, is like, hey, this foundation, you should pay the maintainers, you should pay people. And we don't disagree at all.
Okay.
But when it comes to setting up, it's kind of like a community garden is what we try to establish. We don't go and buy the produce that people have worked hard to make, but we try to set up the plot, give you fertilizer, the tools, and then help out with marketing and other things, like at the farmer's market, for this analogy. It's otherwise you get into a whole bunch of things where it's, we're maintaining and sustaining a project that only that one person's using. You can kind of get into those things if you extrapolate. But again, we really want maintainers to be paid, so we'll help out with connecting them. Someone will come in, they'll get trained, they'll start making contributions, they might become a maintainer. It's a lot easier to get hired and go to places, typically vendors, but some end users as well. They're always looking for that, because that's a very solid person. You can look and go see the resume all in Git right there. And so we try to help out projects specifically when they need security audits or have to go through litigation or have a new need that's popped up that we can help out with. When you take a look at the foundation and how it makes money and kind of like where that goes to, it's really three things. It's memberships, which is companies joining, and then you get benefits like KubeCon tickets and training and certification and things like that. Training and certification is yet another stream of revenue that we take. And then we're more so focused on the certification piece. There's a whole bunch of great training, education, things like that. Some people are putting that up for free. Other people have books. We want to allow the space for that because everybody learns different.
Yeah, okay.
And then events like KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, and other co-located events or one-offs that we'll have too. So those are the three ways that we make money. That goes to pay the staff. That goes to help out with the administrative and logistical things for projects like Zoom accounts and hiring people as project managers. They'll come in and can help out with some of these services that projects have. Artwork that gets created, a whole bunch of other things like that. It's kind of like what the makeup looks like.
When I was researching, Cloud Native Foundation is a foundation that was founded by Linux Foundation, right? Is that that's the relationship between these two organizations, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then there is also Apache Foundation, and I was trying to do a research like, what's the relationship between Linux Foundation and Apache Foundation? And then there's like a really nice, somebody wrote like a really nice answer on the Quora, I believe so. And he explained like these two organizations, they don't really compete between each other. If something, they complement each other, but they're like two of the biggest probably in this space, right? So this is like, Linux Foundation is on top of this. That's kind of how I understand it. Okay.
Yeah. There's the Linux Foundation, and then we're a sub foundation under them. So similar to like OpenSSF Foundation and several other, like PyTorch is under Linux Foundation, LFNAI. You can tell what's been on my brain recently. But it's like I keep hearing about it. But that's how that's set up, and then that gives us a really good structure and keep it lean and small too. I'd say the biggest difference with the Linux Foundation and the Apache Foundation is, again, kind of looking at like operating revenue. You see Apache is like really lean, but then you have a lot more people donating their time, and then not as many services provided. We're big fans of the Apache Q license.
It's in the similar space, but different. Yeah, of course.
But exactly like you said, we can help complement one another, and then we'll regularly talk with them and people like OSI and just a whole bunch of other initiatives that are going on. I think that we're all about trying to share out that information with people and then just eliminate duplication of work where it doesn't make sense, right? At the end of the day, that's truly what we're trying to aim for.
So we were mentioning a lot about the end users, and those are basically from our perspective, because we are in an emerging market, right? Those are huge corporations, right? We don't have such corporations here. So I would think that maybe, of course, we are not in SF area, but for us, that those are maybe 20% of companies looking at them globally, and the other 80s are not the members, right? My question is, okay, how do then the other 80% shape the technology that we basically use, right? Because of course we are on this free van, right? We are riding along whatever Cloud Native Foundation or the big guys do. Sometimes it's relatively complicated. Sometimes we are super grateful for all the technologies. Is there like a way, or how can maybe we do some input, or how does that come in?
I think when you take a look at the foundation and projects, it's again, if you had like a whole bunch of cloud service providers all working on like distributed storage or something like that, they might have 8 different ways in which you interact with that, and then that becomes very difficult as an end user to be like, okay, we want to move from cloud service provider 1 to 2. They do it a completely different way. We have to rewrite everything. So that's where standards and the foundation comes in. So vendors have really realized this, that they can plan a lot better across their teams as well when they have a shared specification that they can use, like OCI, the Open Container Interface. There's storage interface, a network interface now. And so they've learned the benefits of working on that, and then sending people to kind of interact with the community, work on those specifications, and have those conversations. Vendors really do want to sell to end users too. So that's like how many end users are members within the CNCF. That's a good measure as far as what's the health. Are they staying? Are they going? And this year it's been, with a lot of people moving their budgets around for like AI and trying to make understand the shape of that. We've seen the lowest churn for end user members thus far. So I've been really happy. I've had a lot of conversations with many of them, and they're like, I'm glad that they're staying and really investing back into the ecosystem. But that's the biggest thing that they'll share back with is just trying to save time, trying to make sense of things. One of the things that the end user technical advisory board is working on as well. We have a site up right now, but there's going to be examples in it just before KubeCon. Called architecture.cncf.io. And that's when I was an end user working at Disney. That's the thing I wish I had was give me some reference architectures, just show me some workflows and patterns. The tool's not enough, right?
Yeah.
I know I have a hammer. What can I do with it? Is this for eating soup?
You can use it wrong.
Hit my
significantly
thumb.
wrong.
Is this what do I do with this? And that's what a lot of end users are asking. Like they might have heard about by now, hopefully heard about Kubernetes and know when is and is not the right time to use those things. That's the frame of knowledge that we're sharing right now, is trying to show what workflows are possible and then how people are combining these things together. It's not enough just to show the one project. They're really curious about how you string these things together, how you utilize those interfaces. And then that creates a really good communication dynamic between vendors, end users, or vendors to vendors, end users to end users.
So for example, like you have Kubernetes and then you want to have Cloud Ops, and then you maybe adopt Argo or Flux and observability and container storage. So you're targeting to have like white papers or like blog posts, something like that.
It's we're starting to do more. We're learning from a lot of like the big media companies, right? Where you could take a look at this project, see related content. So if you go and check out like the CNCF blog, you'll see more. We've been doing more experimentation with that, and it's leading to a lot of people being like, oh, okay, now I understand where all these things are. The way that the reference architectures will be set up is basically it'll kind of look like a case study. You'll have a whole bunch of links to the differing CNCF projects, and then charts like a Mermaid.js graph to be able to see how these things link together. And then we're hoping that leads to more case studies and end user journey reports and like actual assets that give you a better picture for what's going on.
May I ask, I think it's kind of related question, like sometimes in these environments, like you feel that you have a bubble, and in your bubble there's like Kubernetes and Flux, for example, might be the way to go, and you think that's the shit, and you talk to a couple of buddies and they say the same thing. But like in your position, you probably you should not have these bubbles, or you should be aware of them. Like how do you like have a better understanding what is like where the thing is going, because you cannot prioritize everything, you cannot do everything equally. How do you navigate these things, even for you personally? How do you?
So I've been at the CNCF for about 2.5 going on 3 years. I've been in the community since like the days of Docker and Kubernetes was coming up. I remember learning about Kubernetes at a meetup. I think somebody hosted a WordPress site in their demo, and then they took out the persistent volume, and then it came back, and I was like, whoa, what? This is crazy. This is wild. But I think that by getting to talk with just a whole bunch of people and see the landscape of what people are talking about, or like, oh, this group is in finance. This is typically a pattern that they'll use. If you go and take a look at manufacturing, they might love it. They might implement something completely different. So you start to learn, the more time you spend talking with people, what the shape of their workflows look like. Media, Disney is going to act a lot differently than say like Intuit or Mercedes-Benz. And so you kind of learn where the echo chambers are just over time and talking with people. So you get to pop a lot of those bubbles, but that happens a lot of the time. And then end users specifically, they'll hear about the latest and greatest things within technology or patterns and whatnot. And they just won't, there's either not the time justification or the ability to go learn the thing. But with like these reference architectures, it gives people something to copy and to try. And so that's the thing that we haven't had for a long time, or it's just been word of mouth or in a case study. And then you kind of have to go and dig and talk to the people implementing that. So it's becoming easier to drive that change once we better understand the problem rather than just have like the ingredients or list of the tools that we're going to use. But yeah, it's really interesting within the community hearing kind of what's repeated, what becomes the echo chamber versus what people are actually doing.
We mentioned Intuit a few times. So here we know what Mercedes-Benz does, like cars, and then Disney is like media. What's Intuit? What's their core business?
Their core business is they have a whole bunch of things like MailChimp and TurboTax and some things that, in the States I'm grateful for.
So TurboTax is like how you submit taxes, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a wizard. You go through, I'm envious of everyone here in Europe and
it's a bit different.
So super important
solution. Super important stuff. I would like to continue this from this bubbles that I asked before. As you said, you have 3 stages in which the projects are. Do you personally, do you have time to explore these tools on your own? And like, how do you play with these things? Do you just make demo apps? I imagine you do, because you will have a talking couple of hours. But how do you explore these things, and how do you find these new incubating projects? I guess for you personally, or in the wider organization, how do you find these challenging or interesting things?
There's another thing that we added that's helping me learn a lot of these things, especially like within the new sandbox projects that are coming in. We just went through the TOC went through the summer schedule, and a lot just got accepted. And so when we do like our all hands and things like that, we've done the funny like Pokemon like shadow, and it's like, what project is that? What does it do? And so those are areas in where we learn. I think that it's great to involve play with learning too. There's a little game controller at the upper right hand corner of the CNCF landscape, and you can click on that and it will ask you questions about projects. So I like note cards and that way of learning. So I love that the projects team decided to add that as a good way to like introspect and look at that. I learn mostly by demos, and then it's being what I've been in this industry, I want to say close to like 17 years, maybe 20. I just stopped counting. That's a job for a program to do.
Welcome back.
Yeah, plus. That's how many years I've been here. But you start to learn and see that it's a lot of repetition of the same patterns, right? If you learn the fundamentals, you're going to be set for a very long time. And not many people do. They might know how to work with a certain framework or library or orchestrator. And that's also great, but if you really have a sense of the fundamentals, you're again just going to go really far. And I keep seeing repeated patterns, or some projects I'll look at and be like, really? And I'll question what the use case is. That's what really urges me to go check it out, is like, I had a really strong feeling about this. Let me go check this out. Do we need to restart pods and do this? Does this thing make sense? How do we actually do policy and introspection? So it's fun.
If Andras now has a new Kubernetes related project, let's just put it like that.
Yeah. Of course, I write an operator in Go.
Like
for ordering pizza.
Yeah, pizza operator written in Go, and has
hello operator.
Yeah, it has a really good README, and it has, let's say, 200 stars on GitHub.
The custom resource definition, there is a hard limit. It must not have pineapple in it.
Yeah. so let's say that we have an operator, and let's say that there is let's say, like I said, 100 stars, and people are actually using it. So how would his project get into the Cloud Native Foundation? How would the roadmap look like? Can you give us an example on top of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in this hypothetical too, it's imperative that businesses have pizza parties, and so this is a business critical.
Exactly, it's critical for Disney and Intel to have pizza, because no pizza, no team.
No team,
And I know I'll be filing issues too with stuffed crust, not, what kind of cuts. It's going to be good. So to get this started, what you would want to do is take a look at, there's a CNCF sandbox repository. And in that is an issue that you can create and kind of list out what's going on with your project and features, and just kind of give the overall description. And then there's a schedule in which the technical oversight committee will review differing projects that are coming in. We've had, not to pick on anyone, I honestly can't remember the names, but we've had people submit, vaporware or an idea, and that's not necessarily what the technical oversight committee or TOC is looking for. They're looking for projects that have a compliant license, OSI approved license. It has a community, you have maintainers, and there's some other due diligence things which are published in that sandbox repository. So you can take a look and see if it actually matches up. And then once you get in, then you start to get some benefits available to you. Like if you wanted to schedule community meetings and have us do that with some of the tooling we built, and so that you can get reporting on that, all of those things start to open up as well. And then when you want to go to, let's say it's really successful, everybody loves the pizza operator, and you want to go to incubating, then you would signal to the technical oversight committee, like, hey, I think we're ready, more due diligence, and then the same thing with graduated. And all those things are published. There's a lot of due diligence work that the technical oversight committee does that I had no idea about until I joined the foundation and got to read through all of the readmes and things that they take a look at.
So if Andras then also needs a test Kubernetes cluster, is this something that you guys can help with or not?
I know that there's Equinix is an organization that's partnered with the CNCF, and there is a cluster that's available for testing on some things there. There's also GitHub runners. We've had several cloud service providers donate credits or allow for us to set up a runner on their cloud to be able to scale with different projects. Same thing with ARM. And so again, if we need no, this will only run on Pizza Cloud, then we can try to figure out what that looks like, if that's, something that we can work with them on. But that's another benefit that the foundation has, is being able to go and talk to these organizations or service providers to get those credits.
There's also like this social element, right? We know that, of course, Intel is contributing to the pizza operator, and then maybe you can establish additional channels just to open a conversation, because they're obviously using the stuffed crust patch.
And in this
pizza and chips.
And this let's say that not everybody is a fan of pizza, and let's say that somebody now finds an exploit in this pizza operator, as we call it now.
Some Hawaiian guys.
Yeah. So, and let's say that Andras is not aware of this stuff, and let's say that somebody somewhere would find an exploitation. How would then this information get to Andras? Would you guys help to try to patch it, try to talk to him, try to prioritize, or how does this work? Do you guys help in this case or not? Yeah.
There's a couple good recipes, that we have that we have for this. And when projects join, there's a whole bunch of things that we make sure that they have, and that's like a security distribution list. We'll tie that into GitHub if it makes sense. We try to set up projects so that they have the most success possible. And so with something like that, whether, if that came out as like a fuzzing or security audit that we did, we would let we wouldn't go say, hey, world, check it out. Yeah. Oh yeah, and maintainers too. Yeah, we don't give that at the same time. We'll give that to the project maintainers directly so that they can go and triage, take a look at things, and then kind of get a sense for ETAs. And then we'll go and publish that after we found everything, of course. But I think that's my favorite thing about the foundation too, is if it's a survey, a security audit, anything like that, you'll get to see all of those things so that you can learn from them too. But patching this specifically, typically, we don't have anything that's proactive besides the community taking a look at this, or the security audits. But when people raise it, it will get to someone. And I think that's the thing that, that's what really helps out with these projects, rather than hey, we just found something in the struts, library or something like that we've seen in the industry. That's okay, we don't know when a fix is coming, but we'll work really closely with folks to be able to get ETAs. And then we have so many members that are vendors, they all want to see this succeed too. So they might step up and say, okay, we have a couple core maintainers, or they might have people to lead into the project so that they're there for the long term too.
Let us have a short off-topic break. And thanks again our sponsors from Caldi, 3FS, and Human Frog, and all the Patreons. I have a thing to admit, right? I'm a huge fan of craft beers, and we have a few pubs here in Ljubljana. And there's an app that I have on my phone, and whenever they connect a new keg or barrel of beer, I get not really a notification, but it's popped up. It pops up. It says, "Hey, there's a new beer," and I know if I have tried already or not because I check them in the app. Right? It's like connecting Pokemons, but instead it's just like drinking pints of beer. And I wonder if there's a lot.
I wonder where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But please continue.
You were talking about bubbles earlier.
And
Yeah, sure. Go.
like there's a lot of projects joining in, like from different like sandbox or like incubator, and the landscape, especially the recent years with Kubernetes, is changing relatively rapidly, right? Because a lot of new awesome things are going on. And I wonder what's the easiest way for me to subscribe to an RSS feed and just like see what got promoted to which stage, right? Because sometimes I go through the landscape and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's, well, I will not implement it, right? But I know that it's there. And then when a problem pops up at a customer that fits that project, then yeah, of course you do additional due diligence, but it really helps to be, I think it's more productive to know what is there than reading like hacker news every morning, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's there like a list, or how is that communicated, how the project gets promoted?
That's a question I want to see this too,
Okay.
and I've found a couple things. The CNCF, I actually worked with the CNCF website developer. It used to be truncated RSS, so that you'd read it in your RSS reader, as many of us do, and it was only to the first like 100 words, and I was like, no, I get that you want people to click a link and go through, but I also just want to be able to read my RSS reader and get the sense for what's going on. So that's been expanded. That's a decent way to keep track of a lot of things, but it's just a lot, right?
Yeah.
So there have been talks of tags and some other ways in which to fix that taxonomy, but that's a known problem within our ecosystem. Is so much news. How do you keep track of it? In the new landscape, there's a metrics tab, I think, or stats. And if you click on that, then you can see which projects have moved within the year, how many have been accepted, and you can see some graphs that'll tie to that. I don't think that lets you click and then introspect what those projects are necessarily, though. But that's something that, that's on my personal wish list too, is to be able to take a look at that, or who donated this project. I want I love history because it's a collection of just what choices were made at certain times with certain effects. And that's kind of what you do with an SRE. That's what I'm doing within the ecosystem. So by being able to go back and look at that full history, that's really helpful. We don't have that tool yet, but something that isn't out of mind. We have a couple of things that we're going to work on probably 2025 and take a deeper look into something like that. So I would say stay tuned. Check your RSS feed for what exists today.
Is there an API for the project listed there that would be open?
There's what's really funny, funny and interesting, is that the landscape database is just a giant YAML file.
Of course it is.
Obviously, it's a giant
So does it have an API? Yeah, kind of. There is an endpoint. I'm not sure if it's documented for the CNCF website, but there is a way to be able to list out projects, things like that. I'd say DevStats is probably another good way. That definitely has an API. I've used that. You could see people's contributions, company contributions, and then the list of things and projects that are there. So that's probably what's best as far as what's available today. Big organizations will utilize that API too, and pulling metrics as well as doing the same thing, checking to see where projects at, etc.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah,
I will find the YAML.
it's like
I'm not exactly sure how should I make a parallel out of your beer analogy now, but I have this question: like, you have let's say you have very good oversight in what's in the ecosystem, and that there are 200 and more projects in there, but like, are there gaps in the ecosystem? Are there holes where you think, somebody should make a project in this space? Did you so far identify these gaps, or Are you somehow insinuating to the people that they should probably do something in there? It's a big opportunity, or do you have that insight as well? Do you think that there should, can you give us some pointers on that?
Yeah, there's no gap. It's perfect.
It's perfect. That's why there's 210 projects. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's why we accept more and more projects every single year.
Okay, yeah.
I'd say some of personally what I've seen, I've loved seeing projects like Vitesse, where it's, you can spin up MySQL in this incredible clustered way. Personally, I'm seeing amazing things with like Postgres running in the browser with WASM. Super cool.
That's Otto's favorite too.
It's so cool.
Like it's having a Postgres compiled, running in browser, and then you have the chat GPT or whatever fuck it is, and you just write a query, and then it generates the whole tables for you, relationships, graph is there, and you just like start querying. It says, I don't have data, but I can make it data for you, and you say yes, make that, and then you have, it's like, that's future is now, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's.
I'm not sure that's cloud native. But
I'm too old for this.
It's in everything is browser. Right? Sorry, you touched on
exactly. No, that's and same. That's those are the kinds of projects I want to see. Is like I've gotten to work with big teams, small teams. I think at Disney was the most enlightening for me because we had 21st Century Fox come in. We just got out of all these data centers and got rid of like Salesforce and these other things. And then we acquired 21st Century Fox and all of a sudden our backlog grew again. And so we're like, we just got out of this data center. What's good? But the biggest thing was learning about teams and kind of like what they were expecting. Mm-hmm. And you're always going to want storage. You're going to want to have a way for the app to access these different services and things. You want an application to kind of learn about how it's being used and make its own changes to things. Like, okay, maybe cold storage is fine. Nope, this is accessed a lot. Let's move it up to warm. Oh, no, hot. We really need hot. Okay, let's double active.
Oh, yeah.
International app. You can kind of have something shape itself. Those are, I think, multi-cluster. It's there. I think that's a little bit of a gap right now. Identity and access management in a true multi-cloud way. That really difficult to do.
Yeah.
Multi-cloud DNS, like auto failover. If like Google shut down and you need to shift over to Azure, Amazon, or Oracle, lots of manual steps in the mix right now. Same thing with CDNs too. So there's a lot of like functional gaps like that I see still, and it's just been who's going to come up with the project.
From the end user's perspective, you have to be big enough so that you actually need to tackle these kind of challenges, right?
Exactly. And is it truly in a cloud's incentive to really make that the focus? I would say yes, with a specification, right? Like if all clouds kind of talked and they said, okay, cool, we could get out of the business of constantly rewriting this or building on this legacy thing that we've had for a long time. Like OpenID Connect, can we just make that work? You see like Keycloak coming in. That's an interesting project to check out for OpenID Connect and authentication, authorization. But I personally want to see like the Vitesse for Postgres. Like that's kind of cool. Some of the AI stuff is still up and coming as well. There's a alpha feature in Kubernetes called dynamic resource allocation. And that allows for you to be able to more efficiently schedule CPUs, GPUs, and other things. And then you can, work with WebAssembly on Kubernetes now too. It's not a replacement for containers. It works really well in tandem with. But it's that community, I think, candidly, has spent more time with like specifications and standards, and then now they're just moving into actually making actionable things. So, but it's kind of when you're setting up the dinner table for so long and your family's waiting to eat, you're like you get people that lose interest. So I feel like that's
this WebAssembly. We touched on this demo that we equally share passionately about. This idea is very interesting that the next generation of containers is going to be WebAssembly. This is I've heard this 2 to 3 years ago. I've seen a couple of projects that are actually trying to build like whole durable computing platforms on top of these things. These are like very interesting ideas that like will probably shape a lot of these tools if they actually make it to more adoption, I guess.
I think it needs more stories. We had like at KubeCon, where was that? was that? I think it was. Yeah, it was in Paris. We talked about like Zeiss.
Yeah.
They couldn't grow their data center size, but they were asked to do more with their compute and their applications. And so they turned to WebAssembly to save the day, and were able to more effectively and efficiently utilize all of their compute using WebAssembly and all the features it had.
Where do you think this gain comes into the play? Why do you think these WebAssembly would be more efficient in sense?
It took a little bit of rethinking of the way that they set up their applications, but more efficient in that their workload specifically is one that was bursty. So things would come in, you'd scale up, you'd be able to handle that at an immense scale, and then scale back down. So I think that WebAssembly does really good at those kinds of workloads, whereas containers are better at others too.
Yeah.
Like running a database in that for production, that might be something that needs to be thought about.
It's funny how WebAssembly nowadays is used on the backend because it's a multi-arch assembly.
It goes around.
So it's just like, oh my God, so funny. If you think about it, like from 5 years ago.
It's wild. I remember ASM.js, and I got so excited way back when that was a thing. But yeah, even like Disney Plus, they utilize a lot of WebAssembly for like their front end to create really nice UX UI. But we're seeing it skew into the back end.
So it seems that the Cloud Native Foundation, you are starting to becoming relatively serious, like design/RFC organization. Like even if it's not super official or semi-official, right? There are pages about those standards that then different vendors agree on, and there's maybe a larger open source project adopting that standard, and there's maybe a smaller one for us plebs so that we can also maybe have distributed storage but with not such much complexity. It seems that that's a really important role nowadays.
Absolutely. I think that and we have lots of reports to help show that too, because that's been our hypothesis for a while as well as a foundation, is like, if we have this set, does it become easier as an end user or vendor? You can get that implementation or that spec built at home too, and you could build against it and be like, okay, one day I could make a product that'll integrate with this specific workflow, or I can shift over and you're not locked into a specific vendor. That's, I think, the real benefit and treasure of having the community, keep everybody honest too, and in a vendor neutral way. One thing, like right now, I'd love it if we had, if OpenAI were open to donating their model spec to a foundation so that it could be vendor neutral. Everyone kind of utilizes OpenAI's API structure and their model spec and everything right now, but it's still kind of owned by one vendor. And so you see people shaping to that rather than thinking critically, I would say, about how, it works, this is great, but it'd be nice to be able to have something like, WC3 or those kinds of bodies managing a specification and then bringing in the right people to be able to interact with that.
Now I started thinking, like, you said you're with Cloud Native Foundation for two almost 3 years now. This whole AI wave hype explosion, that's what I call it kind of like shook this whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, wait, what?
Whatever you were doing now, there's like a GPU in the mix, and the workflows are different, and people have now these beastie machines, and everything needs to be,
cool lights.
yeah. Demos are becoming insane. I'm not sure if I'll have a job next week, but this has probably rapidly changed things for you as well. How do you guys tackle these challenges? I guess it's a different environment now.
It's been really interesting. Is like that's my soundbite.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But Kubernetes is great. Kubernetes is a great platform to build platforms. And so there's a lot that it already did. And so we would have folks from the press and media come out and ask, like, hey, what's going on with this? When's it going to be ready? And we're like, oh, it is already. They're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And so as you deal with batch workloads and stats and things like that, like, yes, that's already there. When it comes to some of the other inference things or being able to, like, you can't right now in Kubernetes tap into a GPU and say, I want 1.5 GPUs, right? You don't have that kind of experience. And that's why NVIDIA bought Run AI, is because that's really what they're looking to do, is how do we virtualize this and make it make sense? That's what the Kubernetes community is working on, both NVIDIA, Intel, and several others, in that dynamic resource allocation feature, so that you can actually schedule things more effectively, and then even existing CPUs and other kinds of devices that you're plugging in, you have more control over it. They've, in testing that, I think that they said that they were able to raise some data centers where they're testing from like 60% efficiency to like 90. So like they're seeing some wild things happen when you're just able to better schedule things and then more quickly make changes. Orchestration's crazy and difficult on that front. So that's one of the ways in which we're shaping and changing things. The organizations I've spoken to kind of a couple different archetypes for that. Some are like, AI, let's go. And then you jump in and they throw a bunch of stuff out and they realize, oh, no, we still need about 70% at least of what we're doing already. This is just going to augment it. And then you have other groups that I think are thinking more effectively about it, where they're taking a look at like how they route those kinds of requests. Hey, this has personally identifiable information in it. Nope, don't even send it out of the app. Or let's send it to a small language model or our own trained LLM rather than to the vendor that's going to cost like 30 times what we want to pay for this. And then others like Adobe that completely got rid of all of their closed source stuff behind the scenes for a couple of their platforms, and are utilizing open source now to interact with that. So really cool stories that we're starting to see come out. And then I think, again, if you know your fundamentals well, you're not going to be throwing away as much of the application as you need. Again, a lot of it, does it need AI or can you actually do this with stats is a reasonable question to ask. I know, not a fun one because you're like, no, but my AI project. But it's you take a look at it's what do you want to do, and AI is great for like reasoning. So if you have a crazy if then else case statement kind of thing going on, sure, maybe that's something that can help on that front. Data classification is a big one, and then a lot of organizations aren't ready on that front either. They don't have the right taxonomy, and they need to go before they even train their data or work with it in that kind of vectorized way. They have to get their data in order, and so that's also something where you can use AI to help out a little bit with that too. But not a lot of people want to jump in and do data classification.
A lot of paradigms are still the same in that regards in terms of data. I would say like, okay, we have vectors now and vector databases and all that stuff, but there's like still, at what point we won't need to write YAML files that you guys really love. Or Jinja templates that you love even more there, right?
The best
the
best decision is you take a templating language for HTML and start writing YAML in it. That's the best, right? And then you miss one minus on a tag, and
that's what I'm using AI for. It's like, it's my YAML valid.
But in terms of like defining these specs for Kubernetes and things like that, will a lot of these things kind of be offloaded to these modern tools as well? Do you see changes there as well to be made so that you don't have to have human that defines all these things and misses, or like, do you see these things change there as well? Or?
I've seen a lot of focus on internal development platforms, not just backstage, but even being able to like, okay, what does the developer experience look like? Like Intuit's an incredible job with this. They'll have their dev team come in. They'll kind of have a sense for like, okay, this is going to be either an Angular app or Java, or kind of like a sense for what tools they're using. They'll check some boxes and they'll say, okay, here are the things I want to use, and go. And then those teams, the infrastructure team, security team, all of these teams can have come together to create these templates and then regularly keep them updated. So as the dev teams are working, they just kind of understand already what they're going to use. They're like, hey, I need this kind of storage or that kind of thing. They're able to self-service add that in, and they have a great platform to work with that is going to stay updated. If things are breaking, they have really good telemetry and tracing on what went wrong. And then they're starting to take a look, and they've open sourced a couple of things. They're not in the CNCF yet, that are like AI ops. And so actually, like, this is an outage, it learns from that, and then is able to, tell it what you fixed if you need to manually intervene. And then it's able to go and take that knowledge and go and apply that to stuff, which is really cool.
So no more panicky Prometheus querying and then figuring out which tags are okay to not query a bit too much.
Okay.
Yeah, and the goal: no more 3 a.m. calls. Please let me sleep.
Yeah.
Then we could do code and kind of like orchestrate what's coming out of all of these tools that we
have more beer and more pizza.
Yeah.
That's all we need.
First AI, then escalate to human. Oh, I love the future.
I love the future is now.
Yeah.
I guess I also AI is shaping. I don't want to go into more because we do have this AI fatigue that's creeping in, but that's not my. Probably
There's I think that's my one, like, if I have one nugget of wisdom to share on that topic, it's AI isn't the product, it's a feature.
Yeah.
It's the feature that helps you enable that. Please don't make it the product. That's a wrong product fit.
Beautiful. I had I saw another, let's say, movement kind of a thing going on, where development environment is also changing in sense that, if you used to have like your development machine and you run everything in there, if your infrastructure is so simple, you have like one node cluster on your machine, you do things like that. But I also sense that a lot of these things is moving to like environments that are in the cloud or semi in the cloud or pre-provisioned for your development. Do you also sense that things are changing there, where engineers kind of like have sandboxes or what? Can you tell me a bit more on that as well? Do you sense this? Or?
Absolutely. I think even when I've been a big fan of Visual Studio Code for a long time, and then I just recently got introduced to like Cursor. That's really cool. But I'm also flying a lot and getting to travel a lot more. So I'm like, the plain Wi-Fi is not going to cut it when I want to do development or try things out. I can't host an LLM and work on this at the same time, and that fatigues me to no end. It's a lot easier for organizations to justify their spend for folks, as well as get them the access that they need when we're kind of going back to this like dumb terminal or simple terminal, and then a mainframe kind of setup where you can plug into the cloud and have your GPUs, all these things or run times, all these things available to you. There's a lot more certainty around that too. So like with GitHub code spaces or Gitpod, there's a whole bunch of things available on that front. They'll make it easier for developers in that sense of standards and being able to give feedback, across your team, like works on my machine, doesn't work on yours within our setup, even though we're containerized, what's going on here? It helps eliminate a lot of those problems.
But you think they were development with live environments and things, tooling around that, like telepresence or things like we see a lot of movement in that direction. At least that's my feeling. It might be, again, my bubble there as well. It's
huge from what I've seen, and anecdotally talking to so many community members. That's favored because this is what is going into production. It's not you're not guessing less.
You're guessing less.
The era of jump boxes are over. What you probably want is submit the request, get it approved, and then jump in with the privilege that you need to debug something if tracing is not enough. So I think there's a lot of work on that front, and our lives are getting better, at least from the operational perspective.
When I go, I had another question. It's not related really to this one, but there is Argo CD, right, for the continuous delivery and deployment. In my bubble, that's kind of like the way to go if you want to deploy these things these days. But there's also Flux, and I think you still might have clients on Flux. But both of these projects are cloud native projects, I think, right? So they're, in a sense, competing with each other, right? How does that happen or work? I think it's good because competition is good, but they're like in a similar space. Do you have a lot of these overlaps in there as well? It just happens naturally.
It'll happen naturally, and I think that's really good because you've had standout projects where they don't have a competing project or anything even remotely close to it, and they're constantly asking, like, are we hitting the mark? Is this okay? It leaves a lot of question. Not that it's wrong, but it's just a lot more difficult to bounce off something and get that sense of if what you're working on makes sense to the community. That's entirely that's around our whole concept of we don't want to be a kingmaker or pick the winners. We'll establish this really nice atmosphere for both Flux and Argo to be able to exist. And I think they'd even tried like make the GitOps toolkit, and then they decided that wasn't the right direction forward as far as like combining the projects. Because they're like, oh, these are pretty similar. Can we mix it together? No, we can't. And then, but this projects kind of went forward. I think anecdotally, I've seen more developers favor Argo and things like that, and then the UI. I think that was like the standout thing. They're like, yes, this is what we want.
See it, yeah.
And then Flux, it would typically be that's mostly what I used earlier on. Was I'm not standing up crazy infrastructure anymore, but Flux was really nice, and that pairs well with like SREs and that kind of mindset too. It just fits into that workflow really well. And I like that because it allows you to solve problems in different ways. It's like, okay, I like this brand of whatever I'm trying to do. I like that it allows for that.
The ecosystem is so all this new wave of tooling, especially for Kubernetes, it's now old news, right? So it's getting more mature. And with that, it also happens that some project might not, let's say, survive, so that the active maintainers have, maybe they just started duck farm or something else, like growing hops, if you go back to beer. Is there like, if you promote some projects to, I don't know, mature, or will also there be like a flag retired, or?
Yeah, well, we have like archived. And so
archived,
people will signal like, hey, is this project alive, or check into this, or kind of see if it's abiding by the code of conduct or whatever the governance or the structure is. And then if it's the TOC, will take a look at that and they'll say, you know, like, no, everything is above board here. Or they're going to say, nope, yep, this is valid. This is worth archiving. And so we've seen, I think, 9 projects archived so far, and it will continue to grow over the years to come. But it'll happen at some point in time. It'll be really interesting when Kubernetes gets to that frame, you know, like, or what that kind of evolves into, if it'll split off into something else entirely. I like what you said too around like stability, and that like it's becoming that boring thing, dependable thing in production. And we've even seen, there was a couple of years ago in a night just like this in San Francisco, where a bunch of venture capitalists were looking at the contributions to the Kubernetes project, and they saw for the first time ever it had like crusted and it was starting to go down. And they went, and then, but if you zoom out, you go back and you click on dev stats, you go all CNCF, it's still hockey stick up to the right. And so rather than think critically, someone freaked out and said, oh, Kubernetes is going down. And it's like, yeah, but that's a good thing. That's because people are focused on Argo. They're focused on OpenTelemetry, Backstage. They're solving other problems now. They feel safe enough to be able to divert their attention onto other things. That's, I think, what's really cool. And so if we continue to do that and think critically, like, okay, this is good enough, or what can we take out of this? What's extra? What do we actually need here? Then what's the problem we're trying to solve? Then you're going to have amazing things happen.
But I also think like engineers have like now learned what kind of workloads do you need, like for what kind of workloads Kubernetes is the way to go. Whereas like you can now do a lot with, I don't know, Docker Swarm or Docker Compose or things like that. You can get pretty far with that. This week we attended a Microsoft conference or NT conference here in Slovenia, and there was like one senior Microsoft engineer, and he explained there's like 4 ways how you can run containers on Azure, right? And this goes from like very simple, just one container, we take care of everything, and then it goes like you can use their managed Kubernetes, and there's like a lot of options. I don't even remember now, but there's like 4 options how you can run it, and you can like tune into which like where your organization is, to what side you actually want to have to deal with these things, where you want to offload this to third parties. So I think like people now, they don't just say Kubernetes is the way to go for it. There's a lot of options in a lot of directions. Even like you said, Docker, you don't have to use Docker daemon. You can use these, what is it called, containerd or whatever to run these things. So yeah, there's a lot more options, but yeah, ecosystem around is becoming mature and mature. Which brings me to my next question. I thought I'm gonna rephrase it differently, but I have this like a really interesting quote, and it says, "Go is the PHP for Zoomers." So my question is this to you guys, like, a lot of these tools, majority of these tools is written in Go. And does that scare you guys, or is this the way to go? Because I see in his face, like when he comes and he tries to explain that he is SRI and he has a really mature ecosystem, and then he shares the stack traces from Go, and it's like all fire and shit. So the question I have for you, I guess for both of you guys, do you think that the Go is the right decision for these things? I know that it doesn't make sense to rewrite all these things into something else because it's so mature and so big and complicated, but still, like, do you still think that the Go is the right tool for these things? So I know this is a personal opinions and all, but still, like, PHP for Zoomers, do you use it?
That's funny. I think that that's always something that's kind of going on underneath the surface, right? Like if you are trying to squeeze out performance faster than C or C++, it's going to be really hard. But there's not a glut of people really writing in that anymore. Rust has been something that's been really interesting that's come up, that's like finally starting to like energy efficiency and then performance, like, oh wow, it got up there. But it's really difficult to learn with all the constructs of borrow checking and everything else and components, etc. I'm seeing more Rust projects come into the ecosystem. I'm also seeing a lot more Python because of AI and that ecosystem as well. When anecdotally I've taken a look at, there's some nice like code quality tools that you can use to check open source repositories, and typically what I've seen is, like, when you're looking at TypeScript and Python, usually the code quality is a lot lower, with known problems and just ways that you write code in that vernacular, that idiomatic language concept. But with Go, things have been really solid on that front. Rust, you see some good competency there too. I think it's good for right now. It's really down to readability and does this work the way it should. If there's a big performance thing or something like that, then that would freak me out. But that if you're using too many dependencies and not really watching that, and that balloons up, same kind of thing with Node. That's also scares me. And I'm like, how many packages? Oh my gosh. It takes 30 minutes just to do your npm install. But I think good for now. I am curious to see what shifts over to. I've been big in like Ruby, Go, PHP, and then Visual Basic. So clearly I've picked winners. Yeah, and it's like I never had a hard day in my life. But like Elixir's cool. Like you start to see some things, but it's kind of choosing the right programming language when it has its day in the sun. When you have the community there, I think it's magic when you have that. You have a lot of the cloud native community there right now, but I do think it'll shift a little bit into Rust, and I'm curious to see what else comes out of that mix too. You have like Mojo on top of Python, maybe that will up level the language a little bit. But so yeah, all that very long roundabout way to say, like, yeah, I think it's
yeah. Please let it go. Let it go now.
Yeah.
Andrea.
No, like
just like the song.
I think that we are now at the point where you cannot just use the tools that, at least at my level, I know, well, I tried to learn Go a few times and it's a simple language, but it's not easy, right? Because yeah, the constructs and all the stuff that it has in, it's not really hard, but when you go to if you open up, I don't know, something code available or open source and you start reading stuff, then it gets a bit tricky. So I think that, yeah, it's, if we want to grow, we need to learn the tools that we are using and also the languages that they're written in. So yeah, I'm now on that path. So yeah, probably I will have to get someone to help me out, because you get the basics, but then there are patterns that are not that simple, right? So yeah, and I think Go is a good language, especially for this underlying tooling. If we are talking at the projects in the Cloud Native Foundation, I think it's probably a really good choice. I'm getting maybe a bit skeptical if that's if your app needs to be written in Go when you start, if you are not like the 20% of big companies in the world that will scale and be distributed, then maybe you can do backend templating and some Django, Elixir, Phoenix, Ruby, and you can support your local business. By local, I mean 2 million Slovenian big company, right? Because we have different standards, and you might not want to break your head with ptrace and tracing and how garbage collection in Go and why we are memory leaking, right? But we and Otto, we work together. So Otto was my manager, and sometimes I ask him, should I do this or should I do that? Because I was a bit, well, of course, unsure, and you want to have people's opinions, and he said yes. So probably I think it's a must. You need to know some Python, you need to know some Go, even if you are not working, even if you are using Java, if you use Kubernetes, look, if there's a simple operator, you might want to skim through the code and have a basic understanding what it does. And then you see that there's some QLang that is parsing some YAML, and maybe that's also useful for you. So I would say yes, so learn. And when we do like a smooth transition to learning, Cloud Native Foundation also have certifications, right? What are the most popular ones? What do you offer?
I think KCA, KCAD, I think it's KSA. That's not a secret organization. It's Kubernetes Security Administrator.
Okay.
It's not like NSA. but those are the most popular right now just because it's Kubernetes and it culminates a lot of things, whether you're developing on top of it as a developer, whether you just want to be more infrastructure minded and work on that side of things. We have a Kubestronaut program where if you get all the 5 existing certifications right now, we send you a jacket, we put a spotlight on you, you get in a blog post, and I think there's over 500 Kubestronauts so far. It's been a fun way to gamify the training and certs.
We had one discussion with Andraž, and he was like, "This guy is Kubestronaut." I was like, "What?"
Yeah,
and he was like, "No,
No.
He was like, "This is elite."
Yeah.
He's like elite. There's like 2 guys,
something 4 in
or
Slovenia.
4. Yeah. He's
Wow,
like,
wow.
he's elite. I'm like, okay,
we are a big community.
Big community.
We know everyone.
We've been talking about potentially doing a helmet too, so you may see that happen. I'm
So
not in charge
you
of
need
that.
you need to have 5 certificates to be Kubestron, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They're hard to get. Like, what do you test for? Or like, how does it?
I'd say so. There's like the security one. I'd say is like that's pretty hard. With anything, if you know the answer, it's easy. Like,
of course.
But I know that I'd say that was pretty intense. I'd say the KCA. I'd say that for me personally was a little bit easier just because I knew Kubernetes from that side. The developer one was the one that had me thinking because you were delving deeper into and working on things like pizza controllers and those APIs and what that looked like. But security is always going to be a pretty hard one. And then we just changed the lifetime of those certifications too from 3 years to 2, just because so much changes within that time period too. It's not a good measure if it's like 3 years aged out.
Yeah, apps make sense. Yeah.
That's like what 12 Kubernetes releases. It's a lot, but or nine now. But I really like I do like that focus on education and seeing where all of these people are learning across the CNCF.
Yeah,
may I please have the final question then? Are you fine with that? And then we have some pizza and some beer. Okay, we know that if you want to become a senior in this space, you become Kubestronaut, and that's kind of like a certification. You should do it. But I have a question for both of you guys. What would be good advice for somebody that has seen some of these things, wants to go into ops, SRI, wants to work with Kubernetes, wants to explore the stuff, wants to become more familiar with the stuff, but it's a complete junior. So, can you give some advice to like very, very beginners, or let's say it like that? Can you give me something there, please, so that
do you want to
let that be kind of like a...
Yeah, my advice would be like try and learn everything that is popular or that you find useful, right? So build it in your Doal clusters or in your free time, or even try to ask your manager if you can play around with some technology that you might not even adopt, just to explore a bit. Because as Tyler mentioned, you will get some foundations, right? There are patterns that repeat, but then, especially if in the past, if you're building features or shipping a lot of code and adding value for customers with creating new things, also if you move to ops or SRE, try to be humble. The most important thing is to provide value, stability, and not to write a lot of custom code, right? Because sometimes we maybe do too much of, I don't know,
Bash.
Well, you can't escape Bash, right? And you should probably be really good at it, but you don't maybe want to write like a simple Go CLI that takes some templating and then does something so another system that is commonly available can pick it up. I would suggest that try to write as minimal amount of code as possible to achieve the majority of things, because, if you're working especially for, I don't know, international customers or growing customers, you need to understand that teams will grow. You will have you'll be at the company for a longer time, but the new folks that will come in, they will know the basic stuff or stuff that is 6 months old or older, and there is constantly new stuff coming in from the community, and maybe you want to avoid your custom stuff, right? And always focus on the customer, right? The most important thing is to provide value, and to make everyone happy and provide them a good experience. And you can hack then at hackathons and stuff, especially if you're coming from a role where you are the feature guy, and then when you move to ops, it's a bit of a different story, but don't worry, it's still fun and exciting.
I really like that, and you kind of said that too with your answer about Go. It's reminding me of, there's who is it? I think it's Prague, the publisher. They have like 7 languages in 7 days and like those kinds of things. And I really do urge people to go and like think outside the box. When you're learning shouldn't necessarily be easy. It should, like, think about like physically when you're working out, you're sweating. If you're not doing that and you're just going through exercises, whether it be exorcism or code kata or something like that, if it's not sticking and there's not a lot of effort there, it's going to be a lot harder to remember that, right? You don't remember the easy things, you remember the hard things, for better or for worse. That's good learning. And so that's something to take with you as you go through when you're choosing what you want to get into, you're just beginning. I work with a lot of people and they say, oh, I want to do open source. I'm like, cool. Like, let's get more specific. Like, what do you like? Do you like security? Do you like a specific project? Do you like the community? What are the aspects that are driving you towards, you just said open source. Is that something you heard from, a community that you're in? Really understanding and the intent and the motivation behind that is incredibly important. Sitting there and kind of working through that yourself will help you. It'll save you years of time. I can guarantee that. It's what do you want to be when you grow up? Think about that. I'm still doing that. And that really helps illuminate, like, okay, cool. I like security things, or I like working with scaling applications or containerizing them, or you just get a better sense about the ecosystem on that front. That is where the landscape is helpful, because then you can take a look and say, okay, I like these things. We do have a textual representation of the landscape too, the like landscape guide. And then you can read through like what each of those sections looks like for people that are struggling or like trying to make sense of what's going on. And then, like was said too, I think it's great to dive into what's popular, take a look at some tutorials and things like that. You'll be surprised at the amount of tools that are at your disposal as well. You don't need to run a multi-billion dollar corporation or something like that. You can load test it locally, with tools like Hey and everything else too, and simulate what some of these things look like if you want that kind of experience too. So there's a lot of creative ways to think about how to get started, and then situations that you put yourself in. But I'd say make it something that's fun. Don't just go through the motions. Try to make a real world project too, if you can. If you're just getting started with something, there's nothing more magical than writing that first CLI that pulls from an API, and you're like, oh, the weather is 22 degrees. Like that's there's a magic in that, and being able to iterate and try new things too. So make it magic and make it something that you really feel passionately about.
Beautiful. I guess let's wrap on that. I guess. I would like to thank you, Taylor, again for taking the time. I'm looking forward to seeing your demo as well. Andras, thank you for your time as well. I would like to encourage everybody to like and subscribe. Sharing this stuff helps a lot with the promotion. And I would like to thank our sponsors, Scaldi, 3FS, and Human Frog for supporting us. And thank you for Patreons and everybody who has taken the time to listen to this. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.